Very pleased to welcome the Canadian explorer, artist and filmmaker Corey Trepanier into the studio. Hi.
Hey, nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Or should I call you Nanook of the North?
No, that one's taken already.
Right, okay. So where are you from in Canada?
I'm from just north of Toronto, Ontario, a place called Caledon. It's rolling countryside hills and a lovely area to call home in my studio.
It's not the place that Neil Young wrote a song about. There is a town in North Ontario.
I don't think Caledon's north enough for that. But it gives me access to the rest of the world, so it's a great place.
Okay, well, I don't know that side of Canada. I know the other side, Vancouver and Alberta, but I've never been further north than Edmonton, which is considerably further south than you've been.
Well, that is we have a map in my barn studio of Canada, and it goes all the way up to the very top of Ellesmere Island. When people come through and they see where they live in the southern part of Canada, I think it's eye-opening to realize just how vast and how much it spans. It's, for example, 9 hours for me to fly from where I live to the north of Canada over 3 days on 3 planes, so it gives a sense of the scale.
Yeah, I mean, I do love flying over Canada when you come in across the Atlantic and you go over Hudson Bay and everything. It's just fantastic, isn't it? It's just like miles and miles and miles of wilderness and forest, and it's just incredible, really.
And what's even more incredible is when you get dropped off and the plane flies away.
Okay, well, the reason you're here, Corey, is because you've got an exhibition at the Oceanographic Museum in Monaco, and I understood you gave Prince Albert a private viewing last night.
Yes, it was a real honor to be able to bring, well, it is on the bigger picture, an honor to bring the exhibition here to Monaco, and further yet to have the Prince come and have a private tour last night. I was actually here 2 years ago, in 2018, with the first screening of our last Into the Arctic film. We did a trilogy of films alongside, and so that's where we first met. But to come back with the full body of work now is wonderful.
Okay, well, what's it like to be, presumably you have a team going with you on these expeditions, or are you pretty much on your own?
Well, they're fairly small, so maybe I can give you a little overview. Into the Arctic is a project that I began in 2006 with the goal of painting a body of work from across Canada's Arctic, mostly above the Arctic Circle, in my quest to find sort of the wildest remaining places still left in my country. And to take on that project, I needed to go into the field, deep into the field, so that I can experience these places firsthand. So back to your team question, the first journey we did was actually a 2.5-month trip across Canada into the Western Arctic with my wife and our daughters, who were 7 and 11 years old at the time. That was our crew. We did all the filming, we did everything else. We had one friend join us along the way. That morphed into different types of expeditions as I went further north for a month on Baffin Island. Then I spent 7 weeks across the Arctic, and then 9 weeks. Each one, I've never had a team bigger than 4 people, which is basically me, a cameraman. I do a lot of shooting myself, my brother on occasion, and maybe another friend if they can make it. But then there's many other parts of the trips where I'm actually just traveling solo with Inuit across the north who've been calling this place home for generations. And that added a whole other level to my journeys of learning firsthand from the Inuit and Inuit elders, being on the land with them. That has really enriched my experience and appreciation of the North.
So how'd you get around up there? I mean, using huskies and stuff?
Well, there's an old film called Planes, Trains and Automobiles. I don't know, John Candy, a very famous Canadian who is no longer with us. It was a variety of things. It was certainly planes. I never did have trains because there's not really much for tracks up there. At times, I had actually traveled with my pack boat canoe, which is a canoe in a bag that I unfolded at the edge of the ocean and then set up with my easel inside and paddled out to an iceberg so that I could just experience it intimately, paddling around it and then setting up and painting right from the canoe. At times it was small boats. At times even there was a ship that picked me up at one point. But one of the most exciting ways of traveling the North is probably the Twin Otter. The Twin Otter plane that flies in the Antarctic and the Arctic with the big rubber soft tires that can go almost anywhere and can just land on a dime and take off on a dime. That's exhilarating way of getting around. But the majority of my time was probably on foot with my backpack, with my tent, and the solitude of being in the wilderness and putting myself in that place where I can hopefully really absorb it and then create work that has the potential then to be meaningful expression of my experience there.
Okay, and so you're carrying all your supplies on your back, and let me guess, beef jerky.
There's some beef jerky, but it must be definitely dehydrated, because it is in scent protected bags, because you don't really want to attract the polar bears and the wolves. And so that's a whole other process in preparation for these journeys. My wife Janet, who's been on the journeys, but when she couldn't be on the journeys, when some of them didn't work well as a family trip, especially when you're sleeping with a shotgun, polar bears and things, she would spend many laborious hours in the background preparing meals for my expeditions up north, dehydrating food for almost a month so that it could be hopefully light enough to carry on my back and last for a month up there. Yeah. So yeah, lots of beef jerky, lots of oatmeal.
And there's no N-Dubs or Dairy Queens up there.
That's for sure.
Well, the reason that Prince Albert is particularly interested in this exhibition is because it's part of the climate change. The Arctic Circle is being decimated. Local populations are struggling. The Inuits, you spent a lot of time with them. And all the wildlife, the polar bears, the wolves, and all the other wildlife that are dependent on that climate for survival. It's just, it's becoming increasingly difficult, isn't it?
It is. And my appreciation for the situation has grown over the years. When I started out to paint the Arctic 14 years ago, to be honest, it wasn't my motivation to go there. My motivation's always been as an artist to paint nature, to connect with the land, but I've always been very, very passionate about finding ways of connecting others to these places for their preservation and concern. And as I traveled up north more and more, and actually start to hear from the Inuit firsthand about how much change they're seeing, how in their lifetime, my friend Billy Arnukuk said, we used to go fishing here, we can't go fishing here anymore. The ice doesn't form till way too late in the season, goes away early. A lot of the routes that they would traditionally take to go are less safe than they used to be when it comes to traveling to places back and forth on the ice. And so these issues, along with all the research that's been coming out from scientists that I've got to meet along the way, and finally, myself personally, for the first time in 2018, had the opportunity to return back to the exact same place twice, which I'd never done before because the Arctic is so big. I kept going to different places. And to see the change in Coronation Glacier, which is the centerpiece of the collection. It's a 15-foot wide, 5-meter wide painting of Coronation Glacier. It's 2-3 kilometers wide with kilometer-high mountains on each side. So I returned there with Billy Arnukuk 11 years after my initial sort of inspiration there to make this big painting, and got to see firsthand the changes. And I documented them as well, not as a scientist, but as an observer. And this documentation actually will be in our forthcoming coffee table book, a comparison between these various years. So it's been very eye-opening, and it's very concerning how around the world impacts from so far away are reaching into the north, as they have for years. I mean, in the past, there was things like, mercury getting into the food system up there that impacted from, industries in the south carrying into the airways up to the north and getting into the meat that the Inuit were eating. So it's been ongoing, but now it's just kind of expanded on a far grander scale.
And it's particularly sad to see the effects it's having on polar bears. Sir David Attenborough made a documentary about the plight of the polar bear in the Arctic Circle a couple of years ago, and they just can't survive. There's not enough ice and there's not enough food for them. Yeah,
the challenge will be very much can they adapt? Can they adapt to an ice-free environment as time goes along? They're very resourceful, but the evidence does not seem to support the idea that it's going to be very good for them down the road.
Okay, I was just reading in your biography, you've had quite a few close scrapes. Tell us about the giant mosquitoes.
Those are more like pokes rather than scrapes, I suppose. Mosquitoes are just par for the territory. At times, they have been pretty nasty, and they get stuck in my paint as I'm working away. And I wound up inhaling some while I'm working as well, in the south central part of the Arctic in particular. You kind of wonder, when there's nobody around, what do these things eat all year round? And now I know they just save up for when I show up. Yeah. But that's, to me, it's a small price to pay. It keeps other artists away and gives me a chance to see spectacular views.
Well, see, if you were Damien Hirst, you could have had, you could have been in the Tate Modern with those mosquitoes stuck in the paint. That's just his kind of avenue, really.
I just missed the boat on that, I guess. I'm not thinking contemporary enough. Maybe I could have put them in formaldehyde as well somehow.
And there's some very hungry wolves in that part of the world as well.
Well, we actually have there's a scene in my Into the Arctic 2 film where I'm on Ellesmere Island, and it's just my brother and I for a month, and 3 Arctic wolves approach our tent. And we're completely by ourselves. And then they wound up surrounding us. And of course, my first instinct is to reach for the video camera, because it's just, wow, these are incredible creatures. And they just slip in like ghosts. And your heart starts to race, and they're right at our tent, and they're eyeing us. And they actually split up on each side And I noticed only in the footage later how they actually split up and they started to shoot glances at each other and then came and advanced in hunting formation. But really, it sounds so dramatic. But the reality is, Arctic wolves in particular are very curious animals. And up there we were the only 2 visitors in Kutturnapak National Park the entire year who weren't scientists or researchers. So they don't see people a lot. They're curious. They want to know what you're doing in their environment. And though I've got my tripod to protect me if needed, it's really more, for me, a sense of awe to be able to experience them that close firsthand. Polar bears, on the other hand, I don't want to get that close to. As cute and cuddly as Coca-Cola makes them to be, they are top-of-the-line predator, and they're to be completely respected. And I see that in the eyes of the Inuit people I travel with all the time. Sadly, there are still people to this day, every year, there's somebody who's killed by a polar bear in one of the communities. It seems while people are out picking berries, they'll get, the gun is on their ATV in the background, and human nature anywhere in the world is you get comfortable in your environment, and sometimes you wander off a little too far. And I remember reading a story just a couple of years ago of one fellow who did that, turned around, there's a polar bear between him and his ATV, and his wife and son or daughter were on the other side. And the bear attacked him, and the wife was able to dispatch the bear. So it's wild. It really is, and one has to respect wilderness.
So I did a bit of hiking in the mountains near Banff a few years back, and we were told before we went off to bang pots and pans together to keep the bears away. You have to do that in the Arctic as well.
No, I'd rather not bring attention to the fact that I'm there. The greatest asset you have when you're traveling in the Arctic with polar bears is your eyes. And you're always scanning far into the distance for a speck. And if you see any kind of speck, and especially if that speck moves, then you just immediately change your plans to keep away and back out and replan. And that's the rule of thumb. Or the other way, and that's when I've gone into areas that were particularly concerning with polar bears, for example, along the coastlines of Baffin Island where you're exposed to the ocean, then that is where you travel with the Inuit, and who bring guns with them who know how to deal with polar bears and keep you safe.
Well, Prince Albert has been ringing the alarm bells about climate change for a long time now, and
Yes.
Hopefully this exhibition, people come and see it, so it will make them realise what's actually happening.
Well, for me, this is the real thing that has really inspired me in the recent years. And to have the opportunity to be here is a real honor, because for most people, these are landscapes that few ever get to see in person. And I hope to put a face on these places. When you hear about it in the news and you hear research reports about it, this is sort of from the heart, gives people a sense of this is what's at stake. And through art, I believe there's a potential to touch the soul in a way that's unique. Every brushstroke is, or hundreds of thousands of brushstrokes is one person's sort of human interaction with the place that hopefully then can pass along to the viewer as they stand before it. And so it is my deep hope that this work will inspire a greater care for these places and the issues taking place with our climate, with our advance and quote progress that is opening up the Arctic to further, extraction resources and things that we have to really be wise about how we move forward.
So is there anybody who wants to see that happen apart from fossil fuel companies and certain governments we won't mention?
Well, I suppose it's the way of the world. Energy is something that we all consume. And how we consume it, I think, is the most important question that we have facing us in the decades to come. We all use it. I had to take a plane to get here. Something has to go in the plane. So we have to find ways of weaning ourselves off that big river of energy flow that comes from this source. And to me, dwindle that down with alternate energy sources that can help reduce our impact on our planet. And it's not, I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I believe that people are moving in the right directions. I think individually we all can make those decisions as to how we consume and how we live. And it's wonderful to see leadership like the Prince stepping forward to really engage leadership of other countries to make these decisions at a larger level. Because the answer is not going to be one or the other. It's everyone being involved and having a stake at it.
Yeah, although it's fair to say that there are certain governments, including the one in Washington, and other governments that are not moving quick enough. China's another one, Russia, because it's not in their interest to do so at the moment.
No, and I believe one of the greatest senses that I've had from the Arctic is a sense of humility. When you're left in a landscape that is so vast and that you feel so minute in, surrounded by glaciers and far, far removed from the rest of the world, that has brought me to a place of being, I guess, humble in a way that I haven't before. And I believe that the best thing that could ever happen in the world is let's take all of these leaders and give them a tent and give them a month up in the remote Arctic. And perhaps then something will touch them inside to view these places differently.
Give them a fishing rod and a spear and lead them to it.
Well,
yeah, they'd all end up murdering each other.
I didn't say that.
I did. Yes, the exhibition at the Monaco Oceanographic Museum has opened, and it's open till the 30th of April, and we do encourage everybody to come along and see it.
Well, that'd be wonderful. And over the next few days, I'm actually here until Sunday. Well, actually, I leave Monday morning. So over the next few days, I will be in and out of the museum. So if there's anybody in the area who you might trip across me while I'm wandering around there, and if somebody really does want to maybe try to connect with me there, feel free to reach out on my social media. They can on my Twitter, my Instagram, my Facebook, and send me a note, and maybe we can meet up at the museum while I'm here.
Okay, and your website is CoreyTrepanier.com, CoreyTrepanier.com. Great to meet you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and I'm just so grateful for all those who have helped make this tour happen here, like the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, Canadian Geographic, and Hatch, who helped make it possible for me to bring the exhibition over.
Hope it goes well.